Hi, NACIS attendees, both in person and tuning in remotely. I hope everyone in Oklahoma City is enjoying some in-person interactions. And I can definitely say, as a remote presenter for the second year in a row, I am very jealous and I wish I could be there to join you. But alas. My name is Joe Milbrath, and I'm here with my colleague Jim Eynard. We are both cartographers with the National Park Service in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And today, I'll start out our talk with some new inclusive explorations into expanding our maps to a non-visual audience. And after that, Jim will speak about his efforts to audio describe the Unigrid brochure, and then also provide a detailed look into using native place names on national park maps, and then provide some cool bilingual examples. So most of you are probably familiar with these printed brochures that you get when you visit a national park site. Our office in Harpers Ferry is responsible for creating and updating brochures like this for over 400 national park sites. Now, traditionally, when a brand new brochure is created for a park, our office converts all the text elements into Braille and then supplies a few dozen copies for the park to hand out to their low-sighted visitors. And now, over the past year, we've ramped up these efforts to provide Braille for every Unigrid brochure update, even the most minimal and minute changes. Now, this alleviates any discrepancies from park brochures that are updated annually with small changes, and those can build up over the course of the 10 to 20 year lifespan of the brochure. Also, in previous years, these Braille brochure booklets have omitted the descriptions and tactile elements of the awe-inspiring images and maps that make the Unigrid so popular. Now, that is to say, we haven't included Braille in the brochures, but we have Braille and tactile maps all over park visitor centers and waysides. Here we have this raised relief example of the Olympic Peninsula and the Olympic National Park. There's some tactile floor plan models of the White House in the upper right. This really nice bronze relief of an orientation map of the U.S. Marine Corps Memorial, and then kind of a handy little pull-out floor plan model with a little 3D building of Jimmy Carter National Historic Site. So as we examined implementing Braille conversions for our maps throughout the Unigrid program, we were confronted with some really large overarching challenges. First, our maps are depicted in a variety of styles, from traditional planimetric maps to 3D obliques, panoramas, and thematic maps that include, troop movements along battlefields. The list goes on. They're all kind of unique products. And secondly, NPS maps kind of vary in complexity, with some maps, like this example of Yosemite National Park, that are display 300 to 400 labels. They show complex road networks, trails, rivers, lakes, and then just a myriad of symbols included. So, just really complex problems to solve. And, how do you depict terrain, or do you just, solely focus on administrative boundaries? Do you show wilderness areas? It's just a real challenge. And, finally, I think kind of the biggest challenge that we seek as cartographers and map makers of these products, how do you convert this product into something, that you want to bring over all the visually stunning appeals, the things that we really pour our heart and soul into, and you want those same qualities to be available in a Braille product. It's a real hard issue to solve here. So I'll go over just this example. This is kind of our initial prototype of Yosemite. Now, this initial prototype kind of met those challenges with some varying levels of success, I'll be quite honest. And, our office on this worked on these maps with some contractors, and ultimately they produced the equivalent of this one page into 12 different map pages in Braille. And I have 4 examples here listed on the right here, and I'll kind of go into a little detail on each one. So first, the highlighted map just shows kind of an overview of Yosemite National Park. And you'll notice all but a handful of labels have been omitted. The park doesn't show terrain. It really only highlights, the park boundary, a couple major roads, and then a few points of interest within the park. It lacks a legend, so we're kind of relying on the map reader to differentiate between the park boundaries and these dotted lines and the roads that kind of go to and from. So we're kind of really, relying on the reader to do a bunch of heavy lifting with these. Next, I've highlighted the Yosemite Valley inset. Just shows one half of the Yosemite Valley, along with the full page map legend that shows kind of a series of complex symbols that are shown on this map. You'll notice there's just a lot going on in a really tight space here. So we do have some concerns on the legibility of a Braille map like this. One item that we also thought would be helpful that isn't included in these Braille products is actually having an English label underneath the Braille embossments to also provide kind of some secondary information that say the blind or low-sighted visitor is having trouble navigating this map, as most map readers do, and they have a question. We'd like to also have that information available for a park ranger or for maybe a sighted person that's traveling in the park with them to help them navigate along. And finally, in this example, this one shows points of interest throughout all of Yosemite National Park, including every gas station and wilderness permit station and campgrounds and picnic areas. It's just a lot that's included without very much geographic reference. So we kind of wonder, if how usable this thing is when you see just a little a box, shown in a space that doesn't have anything else around it. How useful is that? But that said, I'm reading this from a purely visual perspective, and we do really want to hear what Braille users have to say about these maps. So our next steps, we've developed a series of questions that really go to the utility of these maps, and we're testing that with a small informal user group in the Yosemite community. And, we're looking to hear back from them. I know just hearing that they're just excited to see anything in Braille, which is, just a real exciting portion about this. However, we really want to get at, are these successful, or do we just need to scrap them altogether? So along with that, we've seen some really cool examples out there from like Dr. Josh Miele and the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind. There are some interesting approaches to these, and I'm also really curious, if anyone in the NACIS community has tackled these problems and has anything that's useful to share, whether it's, just an astounding success story, or if it's, just some pitfalls as well, something that could really help us out. So please do reach out. I'd love to hear from anyone that has any other, history with any of these things. So beyond Braille, we're also creating a couple other accessible products that are kind of the equivalent to our Unigrid brochures. This is an example of a story map that we created that's just basically taking all the elements from the Unigrid and putting them into a story map. And it shows a lot of promise here. This story maps are accessible, so they do provide screen readability. They also include all of our maps, which would be useful to show, and we kind of hope that we can also maybe someday include video with these or some map interactivity. There's a lot of promise with this approach, so we're excited about that. And then finally, here we go. We are converting all of our maps and PDFs to provide alternative text that goes along with them, so they can be posted online. This is just a simple example of some alt text for a 3D map in Cedar Breaks National Monument. And it just kind of goes in, describes the map, something that we're required to do to provide them online. And so we're definitely moving forward with these efforts to provide accessible alternatives to these maps. So from there, I'll actually turn it over to Jim Eynard. He's kind of going to dive a little deeper into audio describing things. And I hope you enjoy his talk. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. I'm Jim Eynard. I also work in the publications office at Harpers Ferry Center, the National Park Service. And on the topic of audio description, I want to briefly mention this project that I'm not directly involved with, but this is called Unidescription, and it's some researchers and graduate students out of the University of Hawaii, and they are collaborating with Harpers Ferry Center and a lot of other people to audio describe all of the Unigrids. They've already got over 130 sites audio described, and they're doing these descriptathons where they get teams of 6 to 8 people together to work together for 3 days to tackle a Unigrid. And I haven't done this yet, but I will be doing this later this month. And I'm excited to learn more about audio describing. And as I mentioned, they don't just audio describe the maps, they're doing the whole Unigrid brochure. And this is the specific one I will be working with. This is Whitman Mission National Historic Site in Washington State. This was actually a project Joe worked on. It's a newer brochure. And I will be doing this later this month in October. So I'm going to talk about native place names on maps. This is something that has been already on a number of our maps, and it seems to be coming up more and more. There is a push to recognize that many of these sites are on homelands of Native people and tribes, and there's been a push in the Park Service and just in the general culture to recognize these sites. These are a couple examples. I'll go into a little more depth and just different ways we put these names on the maps, either directly on the map or in a chart. And just as a caveat, since we are a federal agency, we do have to follow policy by the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, otherwise called the BGN. This is an interagency organization of the United States government, which maintains geographic name usage throughout the federal government. So, for example, looking at non-federal maps like Google Maps, you may see some names that you won't see on our maps or you won't see on USGS maps because they don't have to follow the BGN policy. So BGN does maintain a database of these names, which I visit frequently. It has been down for the past month or so because they are updating it. So I can't show you a screenshot of what's in the database currently, but we do have some ways of still getting this data. And there are ways to update these names or get these names changed, or at least propose to do so. So if a park has suggested to add a name that isn't in the database, I can put that park in contact with a BGN person, and there are methods to go about getting names changed. One name change you may know about that happened in recent history is the change from Mount McKinley to Denali. That was directly a decision made by the BGN, and it even goes to so specific to whether the name's going to include the word Mount in front of it. So Denali is actually just Denali. It doesn't have Mount in front of it, where other mountains like Katahdin up in Maine is Mount Katahdin. So those would all be directly mentioned in the BGN database. So right now you can't search the database, but you can download this text file, which you can import into any GIS software, and it will place points on your maps with the official BGN names. This can be useful for a number of reasons, to check names, to check specific locations, of course, but also if you have a map with a large area that perhaps doesn't have any names on your current map, and maybe you want to add some names, one method is to pore over USGS maps to see what's named on there, and then double checking that with the BGN database. Although I've never seen a discrepancy between a USGS map and something in the BGN database. But on a recent map, several years ago, Joe and I were working on a 3D panorama map of Katmai National Park and Preserve. And there was some empty space, and I can't remember exactly what I did, if I downloaded this text file or I was looking at some USGS maps, but I found this topographer's peak to add. And Joe came in the next day to look at the map and was wondering, what is this? Where did this come from? And checked it in the BGN database. And of course it was there because that's where I got it from. And if you want to really geek out on the BGN policies, you can download this 87-page document on the policies and procedures of BGN. This is just for domestic geographic names, whereas BGN does govern both domestic and foreign names. So there's a whole other document for foreign names. And just some interesting things that I found in here, because I have had to reference this document before when I'm communicating with parks, is you can't propose a name, to name a place after someone who is alive, and they have to be deceased for at least 5 years before you can attempt to name a place after them. And the other thing is there is a moratorium on naming things in wilderness areas to preserve the wilderness quality of the area, I suppose. In this database, you will have an official name and a variant name. A lot of times the native place name is a variant name. So when putting a variant name on a map, it does have to go in parentheses. So these are all examples of National Park Service maps that I've worked on. And you can see the official name and then the variant name below it in parentheses. And many of the maps this has been done on is our Alaskan maps and Hawaii maps. And you'll notice that there are different sort of fonts that you may have to find. There are diacritical marks, things like that. So it is important to try to download those fonts if they exist. I'm just now starting on a project up in Maine for Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. And they do want to place native place names on the map. And we've talked about that already. And one of the first things I got was their font, which they were able to share with me. So that will be very useful going forward. This is Apostle Islands National Lake Shore in Wisconsin on Lake Superior. This is an older map, but it recently came up to be updated. And the main thing they wanted was to add native place names on the map. So through conversations with the park, and I even got in touch with BGN to get some of the variant names added to their database, we were able to add the native place names from a reference they had, which was the Ojibwe Atlas. And so we put these names both on the map and in a chart to emphasize this. Yeah. And then briefly, I will just talk about bilingual maps and Unigrids. There are several of these out there. Chamizal National Memorial is actually an example where there are English and Spanish on the map. Usually the map is all English, even if there is Spanish text. And this other one is San Juan, and it also has English and Spanish on the map. On the left here is Tumacacori National Historical Park, and it is a Unigrid that has both English and Spanish text on the Unigrid. So you can see, it might be a little small on your screen, but you can see on the left is English and on the right is Spanish. The alternative to that is to do an entirely different Unigrid, one in English, one in Spanish, which may be desirable because you have a limited amount of real estate on a Unigrid brochure to put type to start with. So if you split it up between an English and Spanish or any other language, you're gonna have to put half as much type. Whereas if you just have a whole different Unigrid, you will have more space. And that is all. Thank you.